Hello and welcome to Sparks and Honey's Culture Briefing. Today we have a very, very special briefing. This year's Hispanic Heritage Month theme is on Latinos driving prosperity, power, and progress in America. And I could not think of a better way to honor that theme and celebrate and discuss also how it becomes sort of a call to action than a pretty intimate conversation with Isaac Mizrahi, who's CEO of Alma and Hispanic Market Power author. Welcome, Isaac. What a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Camilo. Pleasure to talk to you again. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks to the whole team from Sparks and Honey. And thanks to all of my colleagues that are watching this session. Hopefully, we're going to have a great conversation.
I'm sure we will. Thank you. And I'm sure many people know you, but I am going to do the honors of introducing you. Isaac Mizrahi is a world-class, award-winning marketing executive who spent his 30-plus years career working with brands such as Coca-Cola, Bell South, Nextel, and Sprint in several different functions covering multiple geographies. Isaac has been a speaker in several multicultural marketing conferences and has been featured in the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, PBS, Ad Age, Adweek, and other industry publications. In 2006, he was recognized as U.S. Hispanic Marketer of the Year by Marketing y Medios for his work at Sprint Nextel. In 2022, Isaac was selected by Adweek as one of the country's 50 top marketing executives. Congrats, Isaac. Over the past decade, he has transitioned from the client side to the business side of the agency, working with corporations like McDonald's, Procter & Gamble, PepsiCo, Molson Coors, Google, Lilly, State Farms, among others. Isaac also has a monthly online column on Forbes.com where he writes about multicultural marketing in America for thousands of readers and is the author of the book Hispanic Market Power, America's Business Growth Engine, released in May of 2023. This year, fresh off the press, 100% recommended. It was truly a pleasure to read it in preparation for this conversation. And as I was telling you, Isaac, I feel like it's a book that many marketers and people in business should have on their desk. It is a quick reference in terms of key topics. It is also a book that's very rigorously researched with tons of case studies that provide evidence and proof points. Yet, it's also a book that I found deeply personal. So I would love for you to start perhaps with some thoughts as to, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to writing the book.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It has been a journey. On the personal level, writing a book is not something that was on my to-do list, my bucket list. You know a little bit my background. I came from the client side, from the corporate side. I'm an economist. I have an MBA. English is not even my first language. I'm an immigrant. And so there are some mental barriers that sometimes we create. And I had this mental barrier that, maybe writing a book was not for me. But through this process of writing for Forbes and even before writing for Forbes, writing on LinkedIn and for other websites, I started to realize these were just mental barriers. And the book came from the perspective that I have a unique background. I worked for many, many years in the corporate side, doing multicultural marketing programs, convincing management, trying to get resources, implementing programs. And Camilo, you and I overlapped a little bit when I was at Sprint Nextel, and you were at that time working at the Vidal Partnership, one of the best agencies in the marketplace at that time. And then I moved to the agency side. For the past 14 years, I've been working in the leadership of Alma, working with several brands. You mentioned a couple of them. And between my time as a client and my time as an agency, directly, indirectly, I touched almost 100 brands and companies in this 25 years that I've been living in the US. So I have a perspective that goes beyond the opportunity. I have a lot of respect to authors and books that were written in the past, and they helped me in my own education, transitioning from Latin America to the U.S. multicultural space. But I thought that I had a different perspective to add to this discussion, and this is exactly the perspective of moving beyond the opportunity into action, into execution.
And I believe that that thought of moving from opportunity to action to execution is also a theme that I found incredibly important to highlight in the context of the endorsements that you got in the book. So I think that there's one insight that I took, and I feel like it applies to most of us who are working in business, dealing with the new, dealing with things that require taking risks and sort of challenging assumptions, right? Which is the fact that a lot of multicultural programs fail because of lacking a champion in the organization. And I think, as I told you also, your book starts with a bang. You have praise from Morgan Flatley, Antonio Lucio, Marcelo Claude, and a very, very powerful foreword by Mark Pritchard. And it says a lot that I don't have to explain to anyone here who those guys are. You understand these are people who are leading some of the most important organizations globally. These are big names and pretty serious champions. I'd love to hear from you and your view. What do they have in common? What do they see that others fail to appreciate?
You're absolutely right, Camilo. I feel blessed that they all accepted to be part of the endorsement. Mark Pritchard from B&G accepted the invitation to write the foreword. I had the opportunity to work with the four of them, different personalities, different business. But I think what they have in common, I can summarize in two aspects that I think that I like the most. First of all, regardless of being brilliant, and the four of them are brilliant people that you are always amazed to be in their company, they have a strong sense of what's happening in the consumer marketplace. They are very consumer driven, and they understand the consumer marketplace is a dynamic one. So you have to evolve over time. They gather the best insights, information, data, and they're not afraid of taking risks. They're not afraid of changing what supposedly worked very well for their brands and their corporations in the past. I think the second aspect that by working closely to them and getting to know them a little bit further, that for me sets them apart from the majority of market leaders and CMOs and CEOs that I met, is that they really trust their teams. Even though they are highly capable, intelligent people, they don't think they know everything. So they trust their internal teams, they trust their agency partners, and they are not afraid of engaging in a great discussion. So all of them, they represented an amazing partners, not only for the brands that they represent, but also for the trust that they place in their teams and in their agency teams. And I think in an era that we have clients and CMOs that barely have time to speak with their agencies, these are probably the four best marketers and business leaders in the world. And they took time to support their teams, their multicultural teams. And I think that's not a coincidence that Procter & Gamble, P&G, Antonio Lucius and his efforts, and Marcelo, when he was the CEO at Sprint, they excelled when it comes to Hispanic marketing.
And you mentioned they're all very consumer driven. And I think that's something that's easier said than done. It's kind of deceptively simple. Because also one of the insights I sort of found most useful when trying to read the book and understand, okay, what drives sort of a sense of urgency here is this thought that whether you like it or not, whether you are aware of not, whether it's intentional or not, every brand is already involved in Hispanic marketing. Elaborate a little bit more on that point.
I think that's one of the chapters. That's one of the first chapters of the book, Camilo, that I was very focused on when I decided to add it in the beginning of the book. Uh, the key word I think you mentioned in your question is intentionality. When you have a segment that represents up to 20% of the country's population, when you have a segment that over-index in millennials in Generation Z, when you have a segment that represents a significant percentage of consumers in states that are key for any company to grow their business in America, like California, Texas, Florida. So when you have a segment that's so strong in the trajectory on the key demographics, you have to be looking at this segment as a priority segment. So if you are doing multicultural marketing, investing in Hispanic marketing, you know this. If you are not, and you're thinking, no, I'm more in the millennial business, I'm more in the Southwest business, I'm more in the CPG, B2C business, you are talking to the multicultural consumer, you are talking to the Hispanic consumer, but you're not connecting with them. So you lack the intentionality. One thing that we discuss a lot, and there is in the book, Camilo, is the difference between reaching a consumer and connecting with the consumer. And unfortunately, some companies still don't understand the difference between reaching and connecting. They think that by just exposing some message to the consumer, this consumer is going to immediately embrace that brand's message. And that's not what's happening in 2023. The consumer's level of expectation, of demand, when it comes to being approached by brands and advertising has significantly changed. It's much more sophisticated and converges when it comes to the expectation that they have on representation of their culture and their ethnic backgrounds.
You also speak about some of the myths that are sort of, I think, I see them also as barriers between, and I love what you just said in terms of, really engaging the consumer is very different than reaching, right? And, I think we work with a lot of partners in the media and brand strategy business that are very concerned with the availability of mental space and the, difficulties of reaching people in certain channels. But taking it a step beyond into really engaging and connecting with people on a very meaningful basis, it's really our goal as professionals in this business, right? And I feel like there's out of all the myths that you sort of debunk in the book, there's one that I've heard so many times in the last 10 years that I would love for you to explain what it is and just talk a little bit about, your perspective on it, which is this idea of total market. So please.
I love talking about total market. For those who don't know, total market is a nickname given to this idea that we shouldn't be looking at consumers from a cultural or ethnic standpoint. We should have one message that should be powerful enough to drive business among all consumers. It's a one-size-fits-all. It's an idea that on paper doesn't look that bad, but it's an idea that's driven mostly by the need for advertisers to cut budgets and find efficiencies and synergies. It's an idea that became very strong after the 2010 recession and became prevalent in the consumer marketplace in America. A lot of clients, they cut or significantly reduce multicultural marketing investments, trusting the one-size-fits-all message. The efficiencies and the savings were tangible. However, a lot of brands suffer from market share, sales, and most importantly, negative perceptions or decrease in the perceptions and brand attributes, mainly among and across the younger segment. Because, Camilo, the discussion of total market implicitly brings in its DNA an assumption of assimilation, that in the case of the Hispanic consumer, the majority of the Hispanics that live in America right now were born here, different from the profile of immigrant that was the profile 20, 30 years ago and before. So the theory goes like this. Since they are born here, they speak English very well, they understand the Anglo culture, and they're going to become more acculturated to the point of assimilation. So at one point in the limit, there is not going to be a difference between a young Hispanic, a young white Caucasian. It's the famous melting pot. The melting pot that was the predominant, prevalent way of managing the immigration in the early and the mid 20th century. But that's not the reality in the 21st century. Research after research, we see the opposite. We see that the younger Hispanic generation, and most Hispanics, regardless of generation, they want to see their culture and their background, their ethnic background represented in business, in marketing, and advertising. Here at the agency, you know this, Camilo, many years ago, we developed a study, a segmentation study led by our planning department that today is managed by Angela Rodriguez, and we found different segments, and one of the segments is the fusionista segment. They fusion the Anglo culture and the Latino culture. They are 100% Hispanics and 100% Anglos, and they don't see that there is a trade-off here. They're very comfortable being both. And we wrote this paper in 2008, 2009, and we are seeing just the consequence of this trend that we saw almost 15 years ago. There's a recent study from Nielsen. They actually released this study two weeks ago. It's a study in partnership with the We Are All Human Foundation led by the great Claudia Edelman. And in two different points, 2018, 2023, they asked Hispanic consumers from all different age groups how their ethnic background, their culture, their heritage is expressed in several different categories of the society, including brands and advertisers. And the number was around 53% in 2018, and now it's 47%. So in the last 5 years, the Hispanic consumer is more frustrated with the lack of authentic messages and representations of their culture and background. And just to close that thought, the worst decline in the last 5 years, Generation Z, the younger consumer segment. So this assumption that there is going to be an acculturation, an assimilation, and the younger the Hispanic consumer is, the more they're going to look like a white Anglo-Caucasian, it's not truth. It's not based on data. It's not based on insights. Hence, total market, it's really a great idea for cutting budgets, saving budgets, but it's not an effective idea to drive growth.
Thank you. I wanna talk about Gen Z and youth culture in a second, but staying on this topic of myths or perhaps barriers to relevance, I think there's also a lot of perhaps confusion as it relates to language, because there is this idea that, oh, if the majority of the audience speaks English, why do I need to even think about Spanish? And I understand language and culture are not exactly the same thing, but the Spanish language plays a very special, is in a very special place in Hispanic culture in the US. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on language and your advice to people thinking about this question?
Absolutely. In a nutshell, I think Spanish is the language of the heart. And it's a great way to connect to the hearts and the souls of the Hispanic segment. Regardless of level of proficiency, Spanish language brings a level of Hispanic culture to the storytelling. Moreover, we know, based on different studies and different research, we're talking about Nielsen, we're talking about the ANA SIM, we're talking about Cantor. All these studies, they actually show what are the elements of storytelling that actually increase the ROI of the marketing investments. And I can tell you the summary of it. Authentic messages, contextual messages that the consumer sees, they see themselves in the situation. Dialogues in Spanish most of the times, but not voiceovers, not VOs. Real life talking about their lives. Humor, the use of humor, which is another great discussion, Camilo, because what an Anglo-white Caucasian may think that's funny and humorous may not be what you and I agree with our Latino background. So all these elements together, they drive authentic messages, they drive ROI. This is data. It's not an opinion anymore. Actually, it was a little bit in our gut feeling many, many years ago. Now we have the corroboration, we have the data from different methodologies, different studies that makes us more confident to go to our clients and partners and say, we know how to drive higher ROI, and language is part of it. It's funny, Camilo, I'm a big soccer guy. Football, but I'm going to use soccer as an exception to differentiate from the other football. Last year we had the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup. The FIFA World Cup is actually broadcasted in English and Spanish. It's the same image, high quality, high definition, the same game, no delays. But I actually choose to watch in Spanish. Not because the language, and I'm Brazilian, so Spanish is not even my first language, it's one of the languages that I speak. Because of the style, the Spanish broadcasting brings a level of emotion that actually connects to my heart and my soul as a soccer fan. So there's nothing to do with my proficiency to understand the broadcasting in English. It's because of my culture. Last point is that some of the content that the Hispanic consumer wants to consume, they are in Spanish nowadays. Either a Bad Bunny song, or a J Balvin song, or sports event, or music event. So it's not only a matter of I speak Spanish or I don't speak Spanish. It's what is the content that I want to consume, and where is the content is delivered. Is it an English channel or a Spanish channel? The discussion of language for me is important, but it's not as important as what is the message that you want to convey. Authentic messages are the key for success with the Hispanic segment. And these authentic messages can be delivered both in Spanish and English. But we cannot let this discussion of language be a barrier to hide what is more important, which is the authenticity of the messages that we need to deliver to the marketplace.
Thank you, and 100%. I mean, I think our jobs, if we have one job, is to really find that space where we're authentic and relevant, right? And I think that you're bringing it to life with a pretty tangible example, and that can be applied to any other culture, right? And in this context, I want to honor the theme of the Hispanic Heritage Month this year, and I think that it's a theme that acknowledges the great contribution to American culture coming from the Hispanic community, right? And we title our chat today, Hispanic Cultural Influence and the Reshaping of America, because much like a lot of the things that we do here at Sparks and Honey should also be very future focused, right? So I think that, this is a good moment to talk about the youth and focus our attention on the generation that I think will set the tone for what we call culture in the U.S. for years to come, and that's Gen Z, right? Help us understand how you think about Gen Z in the context of the Hispanic market and multicultural market. Give us your perspective.
I think one of the things that we need to start with is to understand that the Gen Z is just a demographic qualification. It's something that we use, marketers, demographers, the society we use to bulk together a specific number of consumers with a specific age, assuming that because of their age, they actually have similar characteristics when it comes to attitudes, behaviors, and advertising and marketing in our case. That's true, but not completely true, because it's very hard to have Generation Z as monolithical group. And as I mentioned before, Hispanics over-index in this group. While Hispanic represents 19% of the population, they represent a much larger number of Generation Z. I think this number is close to 30%. So it's almost a third of them. And as a few minutes ago, I just mentioned that this Generation Z Hispanic consumers, they expect to be treated from a cultural perspective, from their ethnic background in marketing and advertising. So I think the question is, how can we conciliate both? Are they Hispanic Generation Z consumers? Are they Generation Z consumers or just Hispanic consumers? And the answer is both, because we try to simplify something that's much more sophisticated than it was 20 years ago. So when clients and advertisers come to me and saying, how do we manage this? And I say, well, you have 12 months in your calendar, you have 365 days. You don't need to be 100% Generation Z and Hispanic in every single execution. Use your calendar smartly. Converge towards Generation Z in some moments, diverge and recognize the Hispanic ethnicity and cultural background in some other moments. When and how? Well, call Camilo Cruz at Sparks and Honey, call Isaac Mizrahi and the Alma team, call several other subject matter experts beyond Alma, beyond the two of us. There are experts that can help you navigate this process of convergence and divergence. It's upstream and downstream. You have to do both. You cannot rely on a total market, and you don't have the funds to do 365 days of unique Hispanic marketing campaigns to Generation Z or to any other segment. The secret for the companies that are actually winning the marketplace for years is a combination of consistency and the ability to navigate this process of when do you come in with a more authentic message and when you feel comfortable to have a little bit of more umbrella generic message.
And I feel like you also point at sort of this reverse flow of influence. So you spoke about the demographic changes, and I fully appreciate, and this is sort of the part of the book that I found. I saw data driven, and where you're thinking about there's predictions. There's a few things that we can predict with certain confidence. But demographic changes are one thing that we can look at the trend and say, we know how the US market is going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years because those trends are already in motion, right? And when you think about a generation that's at the very least 1/3 of Hispanic heritage, right? And you think about the fact that that is the youngest generation sort of influencing culture at this moment, you start to see this reverse tide of influence, right? And you talk about a few industries, music, sports, entertainment, like you have a few in there that, just begs a reflection. And when you think about U.S. Pop culture and you think about music, like Latino music is music. Like it's like there's no so tell us a bit talk to us a little bit about some of those categories.
And the timing is great. Let's start with music, Camilo. I just dropped the latest article on Forbes this week to talk about Peso Pluma. You're probably very familiar with Peso Pluma. Yeah. He's probably one of the biggest icons of the new wave of regional Mexican music in America, and is a style that probably was more associated with older generations and older consumers. And one of the things that I wrote about Peso Pluma, which can be extended to others like Rosalia, like Bad Bunny, J Balvin, and many others, is that they are unapologetic about who they are. They are unapologetic about their Latino background and even about their language choices. When Bad Bunny performed at VMA, he performed in Spanish. And no judgment here, but you and I know that 20 years ago, a Latino artist that wanted to perform in the big stage had to actually sing in English and probably needed to look and appeal to a more crossover Anglo consumer segment, right? And now we are seeing the opposite. The authenticity is there and it's unapologetic. And I think we should be celebrating that. And we're going to be seeing that in entertainments and movies. Maybe entertainment is going a little bit slower, but we just had the Blue Beetle. We have Amazon and Netflix investing on original content to the Hispanic segment in the streaming area. And we're going to be seeing that in other aspects. My neighbor here, Lionel Messi in Miami, neighbor in the city, because I don't even live nearby his beautiful house, Camilo. But we are seeing the Messi mania and probably the soccer mania in America for years to come, probably with the the climax in 2026 when we're going to be co-hosting the FIFA World Cup. So we're going to be looking at every aspects of the society, and I'm extremely bullish on advertisers not only investing in Hispanic marketing, but in some cases, why not leading their marketing programs with Hispanic insights and multicultural insights? Because as you said, the demographics are there. I think what's different right now is that we're going to have the sum of three pillars: the demographics, the culture that we've been discussing, and finally, we have more data, we have more ROI, we have more studies. So we are reducing the risk of advertisers that a little bit uncomfortable on jumping into a quote unquote adventure when it comes to marketing allocation of their funds. We have the three pillars of an amazing era of Hispanic and multicultural marketing for years to come. And the brands that are leading, they're going to have to protect their leadership. The brands that are not leading, they have an opportunity to leapfrog the competition because there are new rules of the marketing game in the U.S.
And I think that, when I think about those new rules, one area that I find inspiring is, the beauty of the U.S. as a society is the cultural richness that we're all like living day in and day out. And I think that, again, thinking about those new rules, when it comes to authenticity and cultural relevance in many different categories, I think the question is to really understand the influence of this community in how it reshapes or is reshaping the U.S. culture at large, right? Rather than seeing multicultural marketing as this one tiny little box that you sort of operate in, right? At this very niche segment that requires a very specific way of thinking. I think there is the opportunity to think about, okay, how, particularly when it comes to Gen Z, how are they influencing the rest of us, right? And think about those sort of points of reverse cultural influence as great opportunities for particularly some of the biggest brands to make an impact.
Absolutely. You probably know this. I see a lot of here in my neighborhood with my friends. I have the privilege to raise two teenager boys that were born in America, and I'm trying to raise them in a multicultural, bicultural way. And I see their friends, they are not from the Latino background, consuming Bad Bunny and singing with them, singing Peso Pluma. They don't even know what they're singing, so I can see that the other side of the acculturation. Now, one thing you mentioned, Camilo, if I may, is that we talk a lot about Hispanic marketing. And one of the discussions that I have in the book is the difference between Hispanic marketing and Hispanic advertising. Unfortunately, a lot of the times that we talked about the opportunity and execution, we immediately go to the communication, and most of the times to the above the line communication. And I hope that the reader of my book can have a sense that this is a bigger opportunity beyond advertising and even beyond marketing. This is a business opportunity. I hope that the changes that we are discussing here can influence a different type of thinking of what is the consumer marketplace for 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and CEOs, board of directors, C-suite executives have the honest discussion. Are we ready? Are we prepared to face this new consumer marketplace? Are we ready from a distribution standpoint, from a product composition, R&D standpoint, from a pricing standpoint, from a communication standpoint, from a recruitment standpoint of employees that represent this marketplace? There are a lot of consequences that go deep inside a business organization that's not only about advertising and what is the message, what is the film that you're going to have on TV or on YouTube, on social media. And I think that's one of the things that you can see the glass half empty or half full. I'm an optimistic person. I see the glass as half full because the opportunity is much bigger than just the discussion of advertising.
Absolutely, 100%. And thank you for the clarification. I think also there's a space that needs a little bit of untangling, if you will, of clarification is diversity, equity, and inclusion versus multicultural. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that?
There's a chapter for that. I look like the guy that says there's a net for that. There's
Yeah,
a chapter for that.
yeah.
This is very important because after George Floyd's assassination, there was a boom in DEI in America, and I think that was very important. However, some corporations, they actually mix the confuse DEI with multicultural marketing, and I think these are connected, but they are not the same. And in my interpretation, my humble opinion, DNI is much more about the internal investments that you're making, the values of your organization, the values of your company. And multicultural marketing tends to be more externally focused, the consumer marketplace and value generation. Luis Miguel Messiano, who's the founder of Alma, one of my mentors, he actually had this discussion about values versus value. And for me, that's brilliant. And I think that's still very, very important. I think that there's going to be a moment that these things connect because you really cannot be that effective as a marketer if you don't have representation of the marketplace you're trying to serve inside your organization. This diversity needs to be not only present, but needs to be distributed at the different levels of decision making, from the entry level to the board of directors. Because at one moment, you're going to be disconnected from the reality, and that disconnected can cost you money. So very important to have the D&I walking side by side with the marketplace opportunities that we are discussing under multicultural marketing. And of course, ideally, in this modern organization that's being shaped by the demographic changes and the cultural changes in America, there's going to be a moment that D&I, human resources, corporate communications needs to work hand in hand with marketing, sales, R&D, because in the end of the day, this new consumer that's more diverse and multicultural needs to be served in a probably different way, and companies need to understand how this difference is going to impact their respective line of business.
Mm-hmm. And again, back to your point is, this is about business, right? Not communication only. And I love how you explain it as a connection to reality. I think both, DI and multicultural serve that function in a way that's very visceral. When you walk into a room and there's no representation, right? You argue, are you sort of seeing reality with a bias that's limiting the potential of your business, right? And that really, for me, is sort of the bottom line of this conversation. Just staying on the topic of the future, right? I mean, again, we have a young generation that is proportionally well represented in the Hispanic heritage space. That's also creating culture and influencing culture in a very powerful way. We also have, another phenomenon happening, which might impact sort of a little later, demographically speaking, but still very real, which is the rise or the surge of mixed race households, right?
Yes.
So talk a little bit about how you see it as a professional in the multicultural space.
Excited. I don't think this is a new fact in the marketplace. I think it's a new thing that has been reported because of the way that the census changed the way of reporting and asking the questions. I don't think there were more biracial families or multiracial families in America. I think they were underreported significantly because the numbers are showing triple-digit, four-digit, quadruple-digit increase in the 2020 census versus the 2010 census. So I think that was a matter of reporting. But I'm excited because it is about diverse, right? You can have a dude like me that looked like a white Caucasian with a white Caucasian Jewish name, but 100% Latino. and you can have Black Latinos. The intersectionality is great, and we're talking about even about ethnicity, but you have the intersectionality of several different other things: veteran Latinos, LGBTQ plus Latinos, and you have significant amount of diverse within diversity. That goes back to another topic of my book, which is the long tail, right? You have opportunities within the opportunities with scale. We're talking about sometimes millions of people. So one thing that, going back, and with the risk of sounding a little bit repetitive, Camilo, I think it's important to talk about not losing focus on authenticity. And let me explain to you why I'm bringing the authenticity back to the discussion. Some people believe that the best way to approach this diverse America, intersectionalities, it's through casting. Right? I'm going to have a TV ad, I'm going to have a video, I'm going to have a Black person, somebody Latino, Latina, maybe an Asian. If I can have a hint of LGBTQ plus, great. And some people just want to check the boxes, right? It's like the old United Color of Benetton ads from the 80s and 90s. You know, we Latinos, we diverse consumers, we know better. We know when somebody is trying to patronize us, taking us for granted, condescending. I'm going to have a guy saying hola in the ad, and that's it. That's my check in the box, that Latino. You know, let's go back to authenticity. Casting and representation is important. Don't get me wrong, but that's not enough. We cannot reduce multicultural marketing opportunity to casting, again, to save money in production. Hispanic consumers, multicultural consumers expect more and more authenticity expressed in their brand and advertising. And this authenticity is reflected in the stories. Everything comes down to the great storytelling, insights-driven, culturally based driven. These are the elements that make amazing stories. Stories that makes us feel in the heart, not only in the brain. Stories that makes us sharing, you know, a video with our friends, with our family, and say, have you seen this? We have to remind ourselves that we live in an era that's very easy to skip advertising, right? People actually may pay a premium price not to have advertising. Advertising needs to captivate the hearts and the souls. And the formula to get there is through authenticity. You cannot have shortcuts by having a casting, diverse casting, or or investing in CGI and visual effects. In the end of the day, comes back to a great story.
I totally agree, and I can think of a few shows maybe after, so we don't do it live. We'll talk about them, not to name them, but you could tell when you see content where they're trying to achieve, the authenticity through casting versus through, really understanding the community they're trying to portray, right? And I think that's really, really great advice. Last question, and I'll open it up if anybody here has any questions for Isaac. When you think about the changes that you want to see in the market, thinking about like whether client organizations or on the agency side, I read your book also as a blueprint of sorts, right? What are the changes that gets you more excited, or that you think are more important for the people watching to implement?
I hope that the book can be a source of developing the next generation of multicultural marketers. I'm going to be very, very transparent and honest with you. I think that people are still improvising something that shouldn't be improvised anymore. My dream is that multicultural marketing becomes a discipline that people can teach at undergrads and graduate schools across America. And I've been speaking a lot to a lot of schools. Any invitation that I get to speak to undergrads and grads in different fields, PR, communication, media, business schools, I'll do it, because I feel that we need to develop the next generation that's going to take the discussion that you and I are having here to the next 5, 10, 20 years. And that's my dream. My dream is that multicultural marketing can be seen as a serious discipline, as digital at one point was 20, 30 years ago. It's a nascent one. But hopefully you don't ask somebody that was born in Argentina to manage your multicultural marketing just because she or he is a Latino or Latina, or just because they speak Spanish. We need to elevate the level of sophistication in the supply side of talent for corporate America. On the demand side, Camilo, I hope that subject matter experts can get their space. Um, Internally as marketers in part of corporate America, but externally as agencies, research companies, media companies. We are a little bit different from our counterparts in the general market, right? We are not only developing crafting communications, but we also can have dialogues like the one you and I are having nowadays that can impact business. I spend a significant amount of my time in the agency when I put my Alma CEO hat, helping clients not with creativity. We have an amazing CCO, Alvaro Senhor, doing that. Most of my discussions is about how to structure the multicultural space, how to develop measurement plans, how to develop a playbook for business, not only for advertising. So I hope that the biggest change that we see is that on the one side, we're going to have better equipped and prepared professionals using a little bit their instincts and their gut feeling, but more and more data and ROI research, and clients that they see us as partners in business. We are not here advocating companies to invest in Hispanic marketing because we want to do more advertising and increase our revenue as agencies and consultants, etc. We are here to help America's brands to grow their business. This has always been and there will always be about growth. And in order to achieve this growth, things are going to be a little bit different. Changes are going to have to happen, but you have subject matter experts by your side to go on this journey. So that's a little bit the dream that I have. The new relationship between clients and agencies and professionals is a relationship based on trust, based on mutual support, and based on growth.
I love those ideas because they all come down, in my view, to nurturing, right? So is the nurturing of the talent, right? Where is it coming from? I'm now curious about like how many MBA programs have like concentrations in multicultural marketing or multicultural business. What are organizations like Alma or you know, perhaps even some of the bigger holding companies like doing to nurture this type of professionals through internships and through fellowships and different type of programs, and then nurturing the partnership, right? And a partnership that's centered on the business of just one department. Thank you so much. I wonder if there's any questions, any burning questions here. I see you taking a lot of notes, Mel. Go for it.
Thank you. Yes, I took like a good 3 pages of notes. This has been such an extremely comprehensive conversation, and I feel really privileged to be listening to it. One thing that struck me in particular was the insight around the over-indexing of Gen Z compared to the general population of 19% versus 30% overrepresentation in Gen Z. The question that I have is, I'm curious if you think that this shape, age demographic-wise, has an impact on the overall culture in this moment, and if so, how? And particularly, I was thinking about that in terms of the reverse flow of influence, that perhaps there are, I would imagine there are additional connections that come for people outside of Gen Z because there's such a large group within that group. So.
Great question.
Okay, great. What's your name again?
Melanie.
Melanie, thank you for the question. I'm glad you like the discussion. I think you're absolutely right. I think that we know historically, and this is much more in the Camilo's area than my area, that the younger generation shape culture most of the times. And I think what's different right now is that this is a younger generation that, as we discussed, is unapologetic about who they are. They fully feel that themselves as bicultural. And third, they expect brands to recognize them as Latino Americans, American Latinos, we call them fusionistas here at Alma. They're not going to accept that one size fits all melting pot. they are expecting to be recognized as Anglos and as Latinos that live in this country. And I think, as we discussed, this is the challenge. But they're going to be pressing hard. They're going to be making choices with their wallets. They're going to be adopting brands that understand the opportunity, but also know how to act on these opportunities. And we discussed the examples here about this unapologetically Latino. It's when we start to see artists using Spanish and English media, when we start to see this other side of acculturation going in the different sphere of influence, not only from the white Caucasian Anglo to Hispanics, but the other way around. But you're absolutely right. The demographics and the culture are connected. They are part of the same movement that we are seeing in the marketplace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank Katie.
I imagine authenticity in general is a difficult thing for advertisers to achieve. Do you have an example of a campaign or a brand that was successful in achieving a sort of authentic message?
Thank you for the question, Katie. I think one of the reasons I think you're right, that's difficult, because a lot of brands, they want to put their brand first and foremost in most of the communication, while consumers, they actually want to see their lives manifested and expressed in communication. That's part of the authenticity gap that we talked about. The brands should take more a passenger seat and not the driver's seat in the communication. And I think the success cases that I see in the book has 10 case studies. I want to highlight one of them, which is McDonald's with J Balvin. So McDonald's, after a successful Travis Scott launch of the famous orders, an amazing idea led by McDonald's and their agency Wieden & Kennedy, they came to us to discuss how can we bring the famous orders idea to the Hispanic community. So McDonald's at that point had two choices. It could be as simple as getting a celebrity, get their famous order, have some communication produced and spread in the marketplace, but they actually decided to trust their agency partners and their internal multicultural experts. And instead of just doing a remake of the Travis Scott, we did something completely different. In this case, we did a song. We helped J Balvin to write a song, and the lyrics of the songs express his pride of being Latino in America. So the lyric was actually the copyright points of what we wanted to convey, and the song was exclusive to people that downloaded the McDonald's app during COVID, which was a very important tool because the restaurants are actually closed with the exception of deliveries and drive-through. So it was really a 360 degrees business plan that had the top of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel, but we not only had the rational side of the message, but an emotional, authentic side of the message, and it was a significant, successful program. It was a NAFI Gold winner and got so many accolades across the past few years. But for us, that was a clear example how a brand, in this case McDonald's, picked intentionally, going back to what Camilo said in the beginning, consciously authenticity as a key driver to get them to their business goals.
It's a wonderful example. Great question, Katie. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but if you have other questions, you can find answers in
Yes.
Isaac's book.
Can I plug it a little bit in the end?
Yeah, absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. Isaac, thank you so much for your time today and your insights, for sharing them with us. And I look forward to perhaps hosting you in other conversations in the very near future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Camilo. Thank you, Sparks and Honey. For those who want, the book is available on Amazon. The book's available on rootledge.com, my publisher. I'll be happy to connect with any other person that has questions on LinkedIn and continue this dialogue separately. But I hope this book can be a useful tool for professionals and brands for years to come. Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Fantastic. For those of you watching online, just as a reminder, we do briefings Tuesdays and Thursdays on LinkedIn, and on Wednesdays you can join us here in person in New York City. If you're around, you can register on our site or through our LinkedIn page. Until next time, consider yourself briefed.